Oi, oi, hello and welcome to the official Which Bookie Cheltenham Festival preview. You heard it right, it is a Cheltenham Festival preview. We are only about 18 days away from the festival starting at the time we're recording this. We'll release these videos over a few days, but we will be going through every single race at the Cheltenham Festival, giving you our thoughts at this stage, whether they're concrete or they're not. We do have the handicap entries at this point. We don't have the handicap weights, but we'll still give you our line in for those races where we see appropriate. And good news, if you are subscribed to the YouTube channel on Sunday, the 9th of March, we're planning for myself and Will to be going live on the YouTube channel to give you a Cheltenham Festival preview right close to the off. So it'll be when we've got the Tuesday declarations. And at that point, it's going to be very heavily faced towards the handicaps. So we'll talk about the graded stuff during all of this. We'll still talk about it on the Sunday, giving you our best bets, etc. But you want to make sure you subscribe to the channel to see that. However, for now, we will crack on, Will. It is close. Seems like we've got loads of time. Always this time of year, we start to get entries and things coming out. But I think the real buzz is starting to come about, especially now we've got those handicap entries. Doesn't always make it easier to figure out who's going to win those races, but a race that should be easy for us to pick apart, will be the Supreme Novices Hurdle. This race has been, it's been the centerpiece for Cheltenham Festival to kick off for a long time. It's always the most viewed content, the Supreme. I think it's the race that every trainer wants to win to get off to a good start. Every punter wants to find the winner of this race too. We've got an odds-on favourite this year, Kopek de Boards, top price 10 to 11 at the time of recording. He's relatively strong on the exchanges as well. He's just over even money on there. So he's in and around the same price as he is with the sports bookmakers. We've got Romeo Coolio in his second favourite. He's top priced 11-2. Salvatore Monday, the other Willie Mullins horse, who looked like he was going to be the first string until Kopek did what he did at the Dublin Race Festival. He's in at 6-1, 10-1 Work Ahead, 12-1 Kawabunga, and 16 the New Line, but they're probably going to go elsewhere. So, Will, like I say, an odds-on favourite in there. We've had two this century that I can remember. Dungueve that got beat and Appreciated that won. Can't remember any more further back than that, but there's only so far my memory will go back. So is it quite simply the fact that Kopek de Board just wins the Supreme in your eyes?
Well, I think he's the right favourite without a shadow of a doubt. Obviously, what he did at the Dublin Racing Festival was spectacular, really. And there were signs of that from what he did at Christmas time as well, because he kicked every hurdle out of the ground that day and showed he had a massive engine. So I'm not in a rush to take him on. Let's put it that way. Would I back him at the price he is right now? I probably wouldn't, because I think there are some good horses in here lining up in behind. You know, the battalions are lining up on his lawn, if you will. There's some good horses that will run really, really well, and I can see nearer the day Kopek de Board being a horse that the bookies look to try and potentially take on. Whether they can get him beat or not, I don't know. But the likes of William Money, who we saw yesterday at Punchestown, he was mightily impressive, and he's got two good form lines in there previously as well, that link in the likes of Work Ahead and Kawabunga as well. So it's a race that at this stage I haven't had a bet, and I'm not going to have a bet right now. But I do think there's some interesting each way options, and there might be some interesting options in a market without Kopek de Board as we get a bit closer to the time. Another one I haven't mentioned is Carbo, who's only had the one start for Willie Mullins and was impressive. And I think he's a horse with a big engine as well. So, really interesting start to the meeting. At this stage, like I said, I'm not nailing my colours specifically to a mast. Having said that, Kopek de Board is the right favourite. And it wouldn't be a surprise were he to start off what is probably going to be a Tuesday where there's lots of multiples going on with various shorties. Again, we seem to have that every year, don't we? So, really intriguing start to the card, but I'll be looking at some of those slightly bigger priced options and trying to play them one way or the other.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And it's worth mentioning now as well, there'll be links in the description to the Which Bookie website. Will's already got some anti-post bets in there as well. We'll update our tips for each of the days on that link. The link stays the same, so you can check those out. Will's are normally out the night before if the prices are there to be had. With it being 40-hour decks, who knows, we might be able to get stuff up even earlier, but it is a daily link, so you'll have to check back each day. But we'll tell you what our final thoughts are. Yeah, in the without market will definitely be interesting because it's quite competitive in the betting behind, isn't it? Romeo Coolio's got that form, but then the one blot in his copybook. Salvatore Mundi's got the hood stat that no one likes and is obviously like a keen going sort, but they were bullish about him being a top tier horse. The other thing with Kopek de Board is he comes in here, I think his Irish mark's 157. that's one of the highest I can remember in recent years. But I don't think the ones that have been really highly rated have always won. I think Dungaree would have been another one that was high that got beat. My Tent or Yours got his big high rating from a handicap hurdle, didn't he? Q Card was high. But the mad thing with Coppet de Board is he's only 5, isn't he? That bumper run was phenomenal, but probably didn't look as good at the time because it was, I say just a sales bumper, but it was just that. It was a sales bumper with a big price tag that Willie Mullins targeted. He could have gone for any bumper on the back of that performance, really. And that first ride of Paul Townend last time, because I know his jumping was bad the time before, but no disrespect to Patrick, he's a very good, he's a better jockey than I am, let's put it that way. But he's no Paul Townend, and the horse looks so settled under him. It was a wow performance at Dublin Race Festival, wasn't it? I think he's, dare I say, bomb-proof in it. But obviously, bet responsibly. Everything's got like issues, isn't it? And I know people will say about travelling over and things could cause an issue, but like Dungaree was an odds-on favourite for this race, having won a bumper and still managed to get turned over. So just because he hasn't been here doesn't mean he's not going to win. And Classical Dream was keen on the way to post and still got the job done. I think because this is the Supreme, there'll be some extra places up for grabs. I do think that the bookies will try and get him beat, so you probably will hopefully get a bit of odds against about him. But I think when we sit back at the end of the week and look back at the prices of some of these sort of even money favourites, because there's a few across the week, he's going to stand out after to be like the type of one that we think, wow, like we knew he was a good thing beforehand. So I like him. And it is a bit bunched behind as well. Like I think in the without market, I'd find it difficult to be able to split Romeo Coolio, Salvatore Mundi, work ahead like significantly. They've all got to take steps forward. But again, like I say, he's only a 5-year-old, lightly raced. He's entitled to be even better when he comes to Cheltenham. So very, very, very excited about Coppet de Board. I think he's an absolute aeroplane, but doesn't take much saying when they're an even money favourite, does it? But we get this as the week goes on. Tuesday tends to be like Champions Day, the good days racing, potentially punter friendly. And I think it's going to get punters off to a good start in the Supreme with a short price favourite. Right, we can move on to the Arkle Novices Chase now, where there will be another short price favourite. Not quite the one that we were hoping it was going to be. I say hoping because I was hoping that Sergino and Madsborough would get the clash. I was hoping that Madsborough would do what he's been doing this season and give us a bit of a price on Sergino, because I was very much in that camp. Now, the fact that he's not running in here, it does change the dynamic of this race significantly, I'd say, because we do have one standout contender, which is Madsborough. People were crabbing his jumping last time out, but to win in the manner that he did, regardless of how he jumped, was the sign of a very, very good horse, much like Coppet de Board. He's only a 5-year-old as well, but obviously he's already a Triumph hurdle winner. We've got Lodesid is his second favourite here at 9-2. We've got Django Bay that's 9-1, who potentially was supposed to be going for a Brown Advisory, but then with Sergino coming out, they've decided with connections to come here, which seems a little bit strange in my mind, but I guess you'd rather try them at the shorter trip than the longer trip if you don't know definitely whether they'll stay. Then you've got Only by Night, who probably could come in here for Gavin Cromwell rather than go to the Mare's Chase. Firefox has got lots of options. Touch Me Not will probably run here. Gidley Park suffered a setback. So it does look like it's a field that's going to cut up, Will. On the exchanges as well, Madsborough's about a 4 to 5 poke. So while he's like close to 1 to 2 with the sportsbook bookies, the exchange does seem to want to get him beat. So do you think you can get Madsborough beat?
I don't think I can. No. I think this race is falling apart, isn't it, at the seams, from what looks a really hot renewal of it, probably even just a month or so ago, with Sergino and Madsborough and 1 or 2 others just bubbling under, the likes of Il Atlantique and various others, and Paris Pass perhaps. It's just absolutely fallen apart. So yeah, look, I think Madsborough, he was really good at the Dublin Racing Festival. There were 1 or 2 chinks there, 1 or 2 things that you could iron out with respect to his jumping. It didn't visually look brilliant, but he actually got from A to B pretty quick in a manner that he has his own style. And I think you probably need to look beyond the visuals with regards to this, because the way he powered through the line, away from some half decent horses, was really notable. And he's going to be improving day on day. I mean, there's not many 5-year-olds that go to the Arkle, but it's the stature in which he's held and his physicality that has struck him as Willie Mullins' main Arkle contender, really, and put him right at the top of that tree. And in terms of the opposition, Lodesid is I respect, but I think we've seen the best of him. I don't think we'll see much more improvement from what he's done. And I think Madsborough's probably already at a level higher than that with the scope to improve. Django Bay's in here. He's a very good horse. I rate him very, very highly. Have backed him for the 3-mile race. So I'm hoping Connections have a bit of an about turn with regards to that. But this looks a it is falling apart. So they might run well here, finish in the places, and then go for the 2.5 mile Grade 1 at Aintree, which looks his absolutely ideal race this season. So beyond that, it's hard to know how to play the race. I think, again, it'll be probably one where I look at the without markets closer to the time. And there might even be some floating around right now. And further down, a horse like, there's a horse called Jordan's, who is a Joseph O'Brien trained chaser who's just been bubbling under. They've been campaigning him with a view to get a favourable mark, hopefully, for the novice handicap chase. And I'll come to that later on for this preview. Because I do think he might be better over 2.5 miles, but he has shown a lot of pace in some decent races in Ireland. And it's classic Joseph O'Brien. He'll have all of his horses, all of his string, absolutely tuned up to the minute for the Cheltenham Festival. And he'll probably have 2 or 3 winners across the 4 days. And everyone will be slightly surprised at the moment. And then they'll look back and they'll think, well, he always does this. And Jordan's is a lot better horse than he's been showing in some respects. So he could be one that if they did go here, he might run into the places. But it's a big if, because Masborough, is he's going to be tough to beat, but there'll be plenty that are probably scared off. And if Jordan's isn't one of those, he might be one of those to run into the frame at a big old price.
Oh, I like that. That's my sort of downside. I always feel when the race of an Arkle does sort of cut up, or there's not a standout contender, that we get a few of these novices that probably could go well in a handicap, that they just decide, well, maybe we'll just chance our arm in a Grade 1 because we can go for a handicap later down the line. But I like horses to try and stick to their plans. Loderson's run at Cheltenham was good at the start of the year. He sort of impressed me there, but he definitely hasn't taken the leaps forwards that you would expect with a normal trajectory of him. But maybe the return back to Cheltenham will sort of ramp him up. He does like it. Masborough obviously likes it winning a Triumph, doesn't he? But I agree completely with what you said, that Masborough's bar is already set higher than Loderson's with the scope for further improvement. And especially with his jumping stuff as well, I'm a big advocate that I want novices, especially chasers, to be making mistakes over their fences. Not because I want anything to happen, but it shows that they can learn from it. John Bond was a really good jumper over his fences as a novice until he got into the Arkle, made a couple of mistakes, and I think it made a man of him. Envoyland was blemish free until he came to Cheltenham, and I know there was other reasons maybe why he sort of underperformed, but they're only going to get better with their jumping. I do think the Masborough is really solid. It is just the case, I would say, with the fact that he's 1 to 2 with the sports books, he's, like I say, about 4 to 5 on the exchange. He does look more solid than Copec de Board in the fact that he's got a bigger gap and less competition to improve against him, but he has obviously got fast fences to take as a bigger obstacle. So I'd say he's a bigger risk than Copec de Board would be in my mind, but I need to move on from the Supreme, don't I? Because we're on to race 2 already. But looks a good one. And of course, we want to try and pick out some value for you guys. But if it's not necessarily there to be had at this moment, then we're not just going to throw something out there for the sake of it. As Will's touched on, there could be some entries that come in here at big old prices, especially without
I should have mentioned Pidley Park, actually, as well. He's had a setback, so he misses the Pendle at Kempton this weekend as we speak. Don't know what that setback is. Don't know how long that'll keep him off. But he's one that actually, on what he did at Windsor, should I say, he's one with the ability that might just push into those echelons. But, he's had a setback. What that setback is, I don't know. But if he were reportedly 100% and he tuned up and he appeared at the race, he'd be a standout player in that market because he was really good at Windsor.
Yeah, definitely. And it'll be a big nod from Harry Fry as well about his well-being to send him, because he often wraps them up in cotton wool and stuff, doesn't he? Which is the right thing to do. You want to protect these good horses. But yeah, that'll be a big sign of the times. Few things to change, I think, between now and the day going off then for that potentially without market. But we do agree that Masborough is going to be winning this. Right. We will move on to the first handicap of the Cheltenham Festival. Will I get excited about this race every single year? I don't know whether it's because it's the first handicap of the festival or whether it's because I think typically this is one of the easier ones, dare I say, to whittle down the winner. We've had a lot of horses that have won this that have been relatively prominent in the betting, although there's not been the most favourable record for favourites in here. It's a profile-y type race as well. There tends to be lots of boxes to tick. The obvious one just to mention is no Irish winners for however many years, like 40 plus have tried since. And even before, when they did have one before that, it was a long way back as well. So it doesn't mean that they won't get one. Glass half full, people will say they're probably due a winner in this race. But I've had a reasonable record on it, and I've landed on one, Will. And when we talked a little bit before we came on air, and I said that I've got myself into a bit of a state where I can't have a horse beat. This is one of them that I can't have beat in the Ultima handicap chase. I I don't know. I feel like I potentially might want to let you go first, just so you don't, so I know if you've stolen it or not.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I've got,
Yeah,
no, I'm more than happy to get in with this one. So there's a
yours.
few. There's definitely a few that are on the shortlist, and there always are in the Ultima. Followers of mine will know that I'm happy to bet a few in a race, and especially when it's 10-1 the field in this race, there are a few that be in there. The few that are on the shortlist that I won't waffle about for too much in here is Johnny, who's a big trends ticker for all that he's in abysmal form. But there is a little bit of money behind him as well on the exchange. It is JP McManus in a handicap at Cheltenham, so who knows? Maybe they thought about this from a long time ago. However, he's always been good at the start of the season and very rarely backed it up. I know his bumper run he won and then won the time after, but there was a significant gap in between. So he would tick the boxes, which is why maybe he's a popular horse in this race in the betting. But I kind of like him. Kind of liked Lowry's bar a bit as well. Don't like the fact he hasn't been to Cheltenham. Don't like the fact he's now rated 148. Don't like the fact he's missed the Meadowtown and he's running this weekend. So there's a lot of things about him that I think he's got a chance in this typically, but maybe he's a little bit too high in the ratings and he's gone off a little bit. So that'd be another one that was on the short list that, yeah, I'll probably have had a couple of quid and I might still consider near the time. But the one that wins the Ultima, as far as I'm concerned, is the changing man for the Tizzards, because this horse has everything that you possibly need from a form perspective to win a big 3-mile handicap chase. And I'll get onto the trendy bits after, just to say that he ticks every box for that, but he ticks every single box in the trends as well. Now, I do like trendy bits and profiles for races. Sometimes they can be a simple way into a race if I've got no form study to go in there, if it's like a lower level of racing. But I do want a horse to have a form chance before I'd even look at the trends. If they tick the boxes, then it's a bonus. And if they don't tick the boxes, well, I just won't talk about the trends for the race. Suit what fits, right? But he's a second season novice, which is a good thing coming in here. And this experience that he's gained is, you can visibly see it through the horse. Now, he's got real good back form as well. He's run at Cheltenham in the Pertemps when he was behind Good Time Johnny. He finished 8th that day, but he's only beaten 5 lengths. He pretty much clattered every hurdle, but he had no respect for him because he is an actual proper built chaser. He's not one of these horses like a Hillcrest that's too big a horse to fiddle over his hurdles. He just is a very solid mold of a chaser. So showed no respect in that Pertemps. They were trying to hold him up. He was really keen. He actually travelled real close to the winner in the closing stages. Was a little bit unlucky short for room, but it was very good form around Cheltenham as far as I'm concerned. Then when they sent him novice chasing, he bumped into Stay Away Faye and Grey Dawn in his first race at Exeter. He split that pair, and of course they're both sort of 160s horses. Now we know how good Grey Dawn is a horse. He ran after and then unseated at Sandown, and it was, I don't want to say a bad unseat because it was like everyone was fine after it, but it was an unseat where he made a mistake. Brendan Powell tried to stay on like you would do, hold around his neck, and it seemed like next time when he went over fences, he was a horse that took that a bit personally, and he made a lot of mistakes at his fences, which is the reason why he ended the season last year without a win over fences. He started to get a little bit better towards the end of the year when they shoved him into handicaps, bumped into a couple of good horses. I think he even slammed Val Dancer at one point that came out and won a Welsh National last year over fences. But they started this year having given him a wind up. They put a tongue tie on him as well. And from the start of the year, Joe Tizzard said that this horse, he really fancies to win a big 3-mile handicap chase. Fell in the Badger Beer, and then it started to feel a little bit like maybe last season's going to repeat itself. Maybe he hasn't learned too much, but he was travelling really well. He jumped beautifully up to then ran again after in Doncaster, where he just found one horse too good, but they were well clear of everything else in 3rd and 4th. I think he had some scope 20 lengths behind him that came out and won a Roller Merrick this season after. But in that race, he didn't seem to be able to be brave enough at the last fence, is probably the best way to put it. He got beat, and then I think people were starting to question his constitution, whether he was maybe dogging it a bit in the finish. Went to Ascot and nearly beat course specialist Victorino, who's come out last weekend and franked the form. He had 300-3-5, 9 lengths behind, who's again come out and franked the form in the same race with Victorino. But getting sort of just picked up by that horse, we saw how gutsy he is. I don't think the changing man was throwing it away. And then in the Reynoldstown last weekend, I fancied him to do Jinko Blue and Lowry's Bar in that race anyway. He was getting a bit of weight from some of them. And his experience at Ascot and the fact that he is a level above other novices, I think really did show. He slammed Peaky Boy that was in there that's changed yard and probably doesn't stay the trip. And he slammed the other runner that he was entitled to do so. But he was definitely not entitled to do so in the manner that he did. And the handicap has been really kind this season, considering his 4 runs have been 146 RPRs, with one of them being a 145. They've only nudged him up a few times for all those seconds in big handicaps. And he comes in here rated 140. Now, I've got no doubt with the back form, especially running in between Stay Away Faye and Grey Dawning, that this horse is easily a 150s horse. And I think his confidence has just been knocked time after time. I used to get it a lot with dogs when I was racing those, that when they won a race, they'd come home and you could tell that they knew that they'd won a race. And I think the same's going to be for the Changing Man. That confidence boosting win at Ascot is going to stand him in great stead for this. He looks progressive anyway because his jumping has been getting better, but I do think the confidence boost is just going to make him probably improve even faster at this juncture. Like I say, he's got the form at Cheltenham, and Tizzard's got a bit of previous trying in this race. They did it with, they tried to do it with Oscar Elite a couple of times. First time bumped into Karat Rambler, so that's hard luck. And then the time after bumped into Karat Rambler again. But the thing I'll mention about him for the last part of the Changing Man case is that Joe Tizzard had just taken over the reins from Colin Tizzard at that point. I felt like Colin went a little bit quiet. I felt like he was maybe setting up a few horses so that when he handed the license over to his son, they'd get a few big winners. But he was a slow burner, Joe Tizzard, to get his hands on the reins. The start of this year, they're flying. They're like a just over 20% strike rate at the start of 2025. And I know it's a smaller sample size, but they were operating at like a 10% strike rate when Oscar Elite was coming here. I don't think this race looks as deep as some of those previous renewals. And like I said, I think he's got tons in hand. Plus, he ticks every box on the trends bits as well. So I won't bore viewers with all of the trendy bits. That'll be in my written article when I shove the Changing Man down people's throat even more when it comes to the festival. But he's still available at 10-1. There's 5 places up for grabs. I would be fairly confident this horse will go off favourite because he ticks the profile box. Lots of people will get excited about him. Maybe people will want to trade him on because he is Joe Tizzard trained, but I think that's a bonus this season. And he just looks every inch the type of horse that will win this race. But I'll have to say that, in my opinion, gamble responsibly. And obviously, I'm not right the whole entire time. He just looks a real strong bet to me, Will. So have I made enough of a case that you don't need to pick any other horse in the race?
He's definitely on the short list, yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. And you make a very strong case, definitely. He's a horse I have a soft spot for as well. I'd quite like those, certainly going into the race at Ascot last weekend, those horses that other people or find reasons to pick holes at, and you can perhaps give a different view on why they've got beat on certain occasions. And he simply has just bumped into some very, very peak form horses on their day in big handicaps. And, you know, back in novice company at Ascot, he duly put that experience to good use, and he'll put that to good use again in the Ultima. You know, novices have a good record in the race. I know he's a second season novice, so he's got the experience. And it's a race, if you look through the entries, you know, like you said, it's not very deep, really. There's plenty that you can put a line through quite quickly on one reason, whether it be track or trip or just general well-being or progressive nature. So, yeah, it's a race that actually, if you look through the market now, it's probably a good time to cherry pick one or two at double figure prices, because I do think there'll be a few that get latched onto, and the Changing Man will definitely be one, I'd imagine. I'll just offer up one other one at a slightly bigger price, and it's an Irish, well, two actually Irish horses that have definitely caught my eye recently in big races over in Ireland. That obviously it'll be dependent on what handicap marks they get next week, but we'll have a rough idea. The first one is Sequestered, who's in here, and he's also in the Novices Handicap Chase on the same day. I imagine it'll be ground related as to which one he goes for, but he does stay 3 miles well. And he's just he's a changed horse this year. He's gone back to, he's been at Cheltenham twice previously over hurdles and not really performed to his best. So you could probably look through his form and think, well, he's not a Cheltenham horse. But I think he's just a reformed character this year over fences. He's just developed, he's strengthened. He's a 7-year-old now. He ran away with a Leopardstown Handicap Chase at Christmas, and then he ran a cracker in the big 2.5 mile Handicap Chase at the DRF behind one of the better handicapped horses you'll see all season, Back to Normal for Gavin Cromwell. And Sequestered didn't jump as well as he can do previously, and he went round the inside of the chase course at Leopardstown, and he still kept on galloping through the line. He was back in second in that big field handicap. So he's one to definitely keep half an eye on. And the other one is, looking down, Noel Mead's Affordale Fury, who we've only seen once in the last 500 odd days, to be fair. So absolute ripe candidate for that bounce factor, whatever that is. If it's a thing or not, I don't know. But if it is a thing, this horse could exactly fit that particular category. But he was second to Summer's Jest in a decent old rated chase at Fairyhouse a couple of weeks ago. He's had the 3 chase starts, so he's got an entry in the Bobby Joe at Fairyhouse tomorrow. So that would qualify him, the 4th run. If he comes out of that fine and shows that he hasn't bounced, and depending on what handicap mark he gets, he was second, if you remember back a couple of seasons ago, in the Albert Bartlett. So he's got good course form. I think ground is probably quite important to him. He'd want it to be on the softer side, but he's definitely a horse that the ability seems to remain there, given what he did when he reappeared. So, and the Ultima is his only entry at the festival as well. So a couple of Irish options there, dependent on a few things, but certainly ones that I'm going to keep an eye on.
Yeah, fair on that one. And I'm very blinkered at the moment with I wouldn't say I completely discriminate against the Irish runners because of the fact that they've got a bad record on there.
They do have a terrible record. You're right.
but it's more from the further out point. I tend to look for the British ones first, but then I will look. There's always a couple of Irish horses that do attract support, and they can fill the frame as well, can't they? Affordale Future, I was looking at him because we'll talk about the Kim Muir later on, but that same adjust run was eye-catching, wasn't it? And he's obviously got, you say about the bounce factor, but they've shoved him in this weekend to get the run to get him in there. He can bounce there, couldn't he? Which means you can forgive him doing pretty much anything at the weekend, and you'd still be able to make a case for him. And he might be the type of horse that is popular on these preview nights in the next couple of weeks. And all it takes is the right face at a named bookmaker or a named racing site to mention these horses, and the 33-1 that's currently available about him will be gone. Non-runner money back is available at this stage as well. So that if you do fancy anything that myself and Will are talking about, even if we mention a few horses, you've got the option to potentially put 3 or 4 horses from the Ultima in, maybe in a double with another race later in the week to get yourself for some sort of cross doubles and stuff. And when you say about bad ground as well, Will, I've just seen that Punchestown's been called off because of heavy rain overnight last night. So it may be that we get a really bad festival. You just don't know with weather forecasts these days what's going to happen, do you? But that's again another beauty for the changer man. He goes on anything, big heavy ground winner, and he wins on good ground as well. Oh, he's good, Will. Oh, he's good. Right. We will move on if you're happy to.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at the Mares' Hurdle, which it's a bit of a head scratcher at this stage, and unfortunately, it's going to be a head scratcher pretty much up until the Sunday. I know Gordon Elliott has said that they'll let everyone know the week before, but we're still going to have to wait 10 more days plus to find out where Brighter Days Ahead does go. And then with Lossiemouth as well, it's been sort of a 2-year plan in the making for her to go to a champion hurdle. So you'd be hard pressed to imagine that she doesn't go to the champion hurdle. But then if Brighter Days Ahead doesn't come here, will they toy with it? I don't know if they will. I don't think they will. Anyway, a lot obviously depends on who turns up with these two. I think probably the safest option to say is that Brighter Days Ahead of the two is the most likely to come here, even though the exchanges have been a little bit back and forth with her. But there's never been significant enough movements in there in any way, shape or form to suggest that a decision has been made with Brighter Days Ahead, in my opinion. I do think she's phenomenal at 2 miles. I do feel like she's got some questions to answer, even on her season's form this year, to suggest whether she can actually really quantify being rated quite as high as she is. I think she's pushing a 160s mare. And I think the logical, sensible approach of her, much like they did with Lossiemouth last year, is you take in the races in the right order. And I feel like this would be the best race and the right race for her to come in a Mares' Hurdle. If she comes here, she should be slamming these lot. I wonder whether they'll get worried about the record of all these top-rated mares that have not won here, all these short-price favourites that haven't got it done here, because it's always been a race that just seems to throw up a little bit of a shock, even though we've had some good horses. Long gone are the days of just backing Quevega every year, Will. It was much easier back then, wasn't it? But that's where I'm a bit stuck with this one, because I do like to get stuck into some of the short ones in this, even if it was like Annie Power when she fell, or Benny DeGee when they fell. But you need to get into those ones early enough in the season, really, and the value does seem to go by the day. There might be some promotional offers, but Brighter Days Ahead, if she comes here, isn't going to be a sort of backable price. You might want to stick her in multis, but she'll be so short in those prices. I probably would even advise against that. When you start to look at the competition down a bit further below, though, it's hard to know when the time to strike is on those, because if of course Brighter Days Ahead and Lossiemouth don't come here, some of these are going to be really short, and the bookmakers have priced defensively. In a world where everything happens for the right reasons and Brighter Days Ahead and Lossiemouth go ahead against each other, then betting anything against them two is stupid, because they can't both not win. I mean, they obviously could, but from like a profiling thing, the only horses that would be ones at big prices that would interest me slightly if it's for place pot purposes, or maybe looking to do some each way multiples, or on the day if we get a chance to get a price, is take no chances for Dan Skelton. Good, like real good form this season, has done it on all different types of ground. Trip may be a little bit of a question, but has got the right sort of profile of being the surprise winner that isn't so much of a surprise after. 12-1 about that one's too skinny for me though. And Jatara as well for Jessie Harrington. I was pretty impressed with what she did last time. I know Katira maybe doesn't always put it in the finish, but Jatara was unruly before the race as well. Put the cheek pieces on her now. And at the start of the season, they were saying that she was showing signs of being in season. She's one of these horses that I will always make excuses for. And I'll have to stop at some point, but probably have to wait till she retires. But she's always looked like a horse that could be right out of the top drawer, but she's always seemed to show reasons why she's not been able to do it. And I wonder whether this year, I know she was in season, but they've managed to get plenty of runs into her. I wonder whether this is the type of year where she's going to be able to run somewhere near the top of her form. And I think she's pushing a 150s horse on her day. So she's 20-1. Whether she comes to this race or not, I don't know. They dodged the Mares Novice Hurdle a couple of years ago because they wanted it to be bad ground. But I don't know. They'll be the only two that on my radar against them. But look, if Brighter Days Ahead comes here, she wins. Lossy Mouth comes here, she wins. If both of them come here, then this is going to be one of the greatest races of all time for the mares to clash. But how do you see it, Will? Is there an in at this moment? And do you think you can work out who would win the race regardless of who runs?
I think the one thing I can categorically say is they both won't come here. There's no way, surely no way that both of them come here. Anyway, if they do, I'll eat my hat. I think if I were connections of both, I mean, Brighter Days Ahead, I get the feeling that they're edging towards Champion Hurdle with her. Because why not have a crack? She's so good. Yeah, you got to have a crack at it. Lossy Mouth, like you said, it's been a 2-year plan to get her here. But if it has been a 2-year plan, why have you entered her in the Mares Hurdle? It's it's a bit unfathomable, this race for me at this stage, because of the potential for switches and who goes where, etc., etc. If they didn't both go here, Jade de Grugy's going to go off favourite, isn't she? And I don't know. I wasn't that taken by her yesterday at Punchestown. She's won and she's won nicely, but the time of her race compares pretty badly in comparison with William Money. Now, it might be that William Money goes and proves himself to be a supreme winner. So time might tell that actually that wasn't too bad to compare, badly to that. But I wasn't, wasn't overly taken by Jade de Grugy. So I'd probably look to take her on as a market leader if she was the market leader. And then you're looking at, I guess, the likes of July Flower, Calaconte, Cargesi, but a few of those have got handicap options. I think Calaconte has been mooted for handicaps. Cargesi has a county hurdle entry. So of those at bigger prices, Lantry Lady would certainly pique a bit of interest. She was 4th in the race last year, coming from further back in the field than the first 3 ahead of her. Now she's had one run this season over fences where she didn't jump well. Presumably they've scrapped that idea and they thought, well, let's try and get her fresh and go back to the Mares Hurdle with her. She's quite ground dependent, I think, so she'd want it soft ground, but she might be one at a price that could just start to bubble under in the next few weeks, really, when people pick apart this race and realise that it might fall apart significantly. And she's on her 4th last year. She might represent the strongest piece of form once we come to Dex time. So she's an interesting option, definitely at this stage.
It's crazy, isn't it? Because this is the race where we've mentioned so many horses in it, and it could just come back to it in a couple of weeks' time where it's just like, well, it's obvious now because Brighter Days Ahead comes in for whatever reason and it's game over. But there is a world where neither of them come, isn't there? And that's where the market's sort of priced up. So this will be one very much, I think, not many people will be taking their chance now. They would have done earlier in the season. And good luck to them. Will, the Champion Hurdle. This should be fairly straightforward because we just covered half of the field with the Mares Hurdle preview there. But looks to, in all intents and purposes, be a 4-horse race. I know we had the year that Espoir de Lan won when it was supposed to be Bouverdere versus Applejade versus Lorena, but there isn't the fly in the ointment type horse in it. I mean, Burdett Road would have potentially been that type, but after getting beat by Golden Ace, they've even talked about maybe even going for a handicap hurdle with him. It's not the sort of talk of a future champion hurdler is all I'm saying. So the winner must come from the 4. Depends which of those 4 run. State Man, well worth talking about him just for the fact that Paul Townend chose him at Dublin Racing Festival, which was a shock to some people, and I don't know why, because he isn't the best at Cheltenham, but he's very good at Leopardstown typically. I know he got beat by Brighter Days Ahead before, but I don't think many horses would have got close to her that day. I do wonder now, as much as Lossiemouth did fall, whether Paul will still side with Stateman, because Stateman was very laboured in that finish for all that he was going out and doing things on his own. It wasn't the type of performance that I would think Paul Townend would have come back to Clisson and thought, whoa, he can beat Constitution Hill this year. I think he'd have come off of him thinking, I definitely haven't got a chance in Cheltenham now. So depends how they're all working, and jockey bookings will be interesting. But I would. It's hard to jump off the reigning champion hurdle champ, but I think it's easier after what happened last time for all that Lossiemouth did fall. So it wouldn't surprise me if he rides Lossiemouth, and that will have a bit of a play in the market. We talked about already in that Mayor's Hurdle preview when we're saying that it's been a 2-year plan. But all of this stuff said, Brighter Days Ahead better than Lossiemouth, I think, although it's on a small sample size. That race, what she did in Leopardstown was filthy. And I know people will say that she beat Winter Fogs in second and she's beaten she was only beating King of Kingsfield a few lengths at the start of the season. But she beat him a few lengths at the start of the season when I think King of Kingsfield was given a quiet ride behind. Let's just put it that way. Then what she did at Leopardstown, she showed that she's 40 lengths clear of that type of horse. And to be able to maintain that type of a gallop for that significant amount of time, even Willie Mullins and other yards were saying it was a very impressive performance. And I think because it happened at Christmas and didn't happen at Dublin Racing Festival, it's sort of been maybe forgotten about a little bit. So she looks the biggest threat to Constitution Hill, but I'm going a roundabout way to say, Will, I hope they all turn up and we get even money Constitution Hill, because he still is one of the greatest horses that's ever graced Prestbury Park. He, as far as I'm concerned, he will win a champion hurdle. I'd happily bet him and lose my money if he gets beat by a better horse on the day. And I know his 2 runs this season, people will say, well, his RPRs aren't as good as before and performances aren't at that of a champion hurdler, but he hasn't got the types of horses to go and challenge him, I guess, in those races. I know Lossiemouth and Burdett Road were in that Christmas hurdle, but put both of those to bed quite easily. I'm not buying the excuses for Lossiemouth there. And he, before that Christmas hurdle as well, he was lame, wasn't he, after a workout in Newbury and stuff in between, like a couple of weeks before. Imagine being that good a horse to win a Grade 1 after you weren't very well a couple of weeks ago. So look, I know he's got that last hurdle scare in there after 2 jumps. Now he's done it, but I don't see any world that Constitution Hill gets beat unless he's not anywhere near 100% on the day, and you can't predict those types of things for any horses. So Constitution Hill will win the champion hurdle. You can mark my words on that one, and I pray they all come against him, because 8 to 13 about him isn't terrible. I'd happily stick him in a few multis at the time, but he's about 4 to 5 on the exchanges. If they all do turn in here, I think we might get odds against Constitution Hill, which after what he did a couple of years ago, sounds like I'm a madman saying something like that. But is there any world you see that Stateman wins this for starters, or Lossiemouth, or is it Brighter Days Ahead is the main threat, do you think?
I think if they all turn up on their A game, Constitution Hill wins comfortably. And I think on what we've seen this year, we probably haven't seen an A game from Lossiemouth or Stateman yet. Willie Mullins, will always train his horses to peak from March onwards. So, there is a chance that were to happen. They've not had things go smoothly, though, have they? With regards to Lossiemouth, she obviously came up against Constitution Hill in that Christmas hurdle and, was put to the pin of her collar very, very early on by the pace that Burdett Road was going. And that suggested that she didn't quite have the speed for that type of race. But Champion Hurdle's a bit different, a little bit further, softer ground, more undulating track, etc., etc. But then the fall, she's been very weak on the exchanges for both races since that fall as well. So, is she A-okay? Is she going to turn up in that kind of form? It's got to be a doubt for me. Stateman obviously won last time out. And it's tricky to know, obviously, because of the fall, how that race was shaping up. The one thing you could say was that they had gone a million miles an hour, him and Lossiemouth, up to that point. So it would have been fascinating to see how they'd have compared in the closing stages of the race under pressure from each other. That would have told us so much more. It might well have helped, actually, Stateman and probably Lossiemouth to some degree, that they didn't have that, real end-to-end battle in what would have been a very, very tough race after they'd gone so quick. So just question marks for me about Stateman and Lossiemouth. Could be a really good matchup between Brighter Days Ahead and Constitution Hill. If Brighter Days Ahead goes here, King of Kingsfield will probably be in here and they'll try similar tactics to what they did at Christmas time. That will help Brighter Days Ahead, but it will also help Constitution Hill, of course, because he won't have to do his own donkey work. So, yeah, I think whichever way you cut this, find it hard to see Constitution Hill not winning. I do hope, like everyone, that it turns into a really informative, interesting race. But yeah, we've said that many times at this stage of the year, even 2 weeks out for these races, and suddenly come the day, they're not quite what we wanted them to be. But who knows? Of course, with this and the Mayor's Hurdle, it's worth remembering there is still a supplementary stage as well. Quite what might come into the picture for either, nothing springs to mind massively, apart from maybe Joyous for the Mayor's, but it's definitely something to consider. There are forward-thinking connections out there who will be looking at both races and thinking, well, they're not both going to be really strong. There's going to be maybe an opportunity in one or the other. So, yeah, worth bearing in mind.
Yeah, that is very true. But Constitution Hill wins, so we don't need to know anymore. It's all just a case of what price we're going to be able to bet him at, isn't it? And obviously, it's gamble responsibly and all those things. But as I say, comparatively, you don't have to do this. And obviously, every horse is their own individual. But when I see the different types of favourites for the festival in terms of where their price is at, and you look at their ability, the questions they've got to answer, and things like that, like, he is relatively solid, dare I say, even though he has had his issues and he's coming back and winning, because he still has an unblemished record. He's still one of the fastest horses that's ever run on a race course, and he's still put in those 2 phenomenal races at the Cheltenham Festival in the past, beating some very, very good horses. He should just be miles clear of him, shouldn't he? But yeah, if it was that easy, then we wouldn't need to do these previews, would we? Right, we will move on, Will. We need to take a look now at the Juvenile Handicap Hurdle. The Fred Winter, it's a race that is probably one of the ones I would say where the weights are most crucial to being able to whittle down this field, because there's not that many entries. I mean, there's 47, only 22 can run, but it will decide who's going to be able to get into the field. It's also going to show the pecking order of a lot of horses, because you get this every single year. Lots of horses will run against each other, and then for some reason the BHA handicapper will give one horse one mark. It's beating a horse by a length, and it will give the other one £3 more or something, and you think, I don't know how they did that. So there's always a few that are on sort of the short list. It's been a bad race for favourites. No winner of the Boodles, I think 2005 is when it started, has ever run at Cheltenham the same season and won. So that's not so good news for Stencil. But again, stats are there to be broken, aren't they? And as I say, the glass half full people will say, we're due one. You got Willie de Hall that's well fancied in this race as well, that was well touted for a triumph before, but he didn't look to be ridden last time with a handicap in mind. He looked like he was trying almost as best as he probably could. I think they're going to keep, not necessarily exposing him, but I think they're going to keep trying with him this season, and things just haven't planned out. I don't think he's a plot. Naturally Nimble's another one that's on the radar, in at 10-1. Willie Manners has got Lady Vega Allen. I think an Artiste was the last filly to win this race. They've got Mercier as well, another filly. Then Joseph O'Brien's got a handful as well. Put Your Hands Together has been fairly popular. Beyond Your Dreams. There's loads of horses. I could literally just run through every single name and say these horses have got entries, and you can make a small case for them. The one I'm really interested to see the handicap mark for is Wendrock for Gordon Elliott. He's got bits of form behind Total Look, who's a single figure price for this one, and I think behind Beyond Your Dreams as well. I think this horse might get in light, but it depends what the handicapper does. If this horse was under 125, I would fancy Wendrock quite strongly, but we'll have to see what sort of figures come out for it. The Willie de Hall and Naturally Nimble ones, they're the two that will probably stick out to me, as they're the right sort of types that will probably be in and around the finish. Each way plays, you might be able to get 5 places, but I'm interested to see how their comparative marks come out, because I would say at this point, Naturally Nimble is definitely better than Willie de Hall. But we can clip that when Willie de Hall slams him, giving him £7 or whatever way it spins out. But I find this race a hard one to have any confidence in until we get those weights. It's normally a race I do have a fancy in. Whether they get the winner or not is a different story. So, Will, do you find this one easier or harder to do when we don't have the weights? Obviously, it's always hard without the weights. And would it be one that you've got a fancy on now, or one for nearer the time?
No, I do have a strong fancy on one now. The weights for this, in some respects, I'm hoping that the weights for this produce a lot of talk about various different horses that might have been plotted up for this, plotted up for that, and this one has got £2 more than that one, and it beat it by a length, etc., etc. And there'll be plenty of those horses from the Irish juvenile hurdles that will get plenty of talk. Like you said, the likes of Wendrock, he is probably better than a 120s rated horse. Total Look, has shown some signs of promise. Naturally Nimble, probably wasn't supposed to win on his penultimate start, but did so because they went a million miles an hour and the race fell apart. And there's one or two others, that are certainly interesting. Put Your Hands Together is one that I definitely thought was interesting for Joseph O'Brien. Eye-catching second at Fairyhouse on his qualifying run. Good flat form on a decent surface. I wouldn't mind if it came up a slightly better surface, but I'm hoping that all kind of diverts away from Stencil here, who's top price 6-1 at the minute and favourite, and has been, favourite from ever since he finished second to East India Dock in that Triumph trial at Trials Day. And it was almost a case of, with him, I think he's just hiding in plain sight, isn't he? I mean, to do what he did against East India Dock, who for me is, he's the best British trained juvenile we've seen for many a year, without a shadow of a doubt, on what he's done performance-wise, visually, and on the clock. And I think in a weak year for the Triumph in terms of Irish representatives, I think he's going to be hard to beat in the Triumph. Obviously, Lulamba might be something slightly different. But to do what he did, Stencil, in that race, in that he travelled within his comfort zone in behind East India Dock. And then when it was clear that East India Dock was going to win the race, the last couple of furlongs, Stencil didn't really have too much of a hard time of it, to be fair. And he's pulled a mile clear of the remainder. Now, it'll be interesting to see what the handicapper actually does. He should rate him around about 135, given where he's got East India Dock and the third horse home that day, and also on what his French rating is. He should do. This could be one that they get a little bit liberal with and think, well, hang on, we need to be rating him higher. But if they've got East India Dock on 142, I don't see how they can rate him higher than 135. And that, to me, would be absolutely perfect. I think he could run a massive race in the Triumph if they wanted to, on what he did behind East India Dock. So I think it's a case for him. There'll be lots that are talked about, but for me, if he's the one for the owner, which is a big question mark, there'll be plenty in there. But goodness me, he looked really, really good in behind East India Dock. I don't think there's any horse in here of that particular class. Even if they're getting a stone from him, I don't think that'll matter.
Nice, bullish. I like that one, Will. And as much as we might frown upon, like, oh, it's a favourite for a handicap, 6-1 favourite. That'd be like sort of 5th or 6th favourite in most weekend handicaps, and you're probably only getting that bigger price about him because it is the Cheltenham Festival and because we're waiting for the weights. Like you say, if the weight comes out right, and he does get like a 135, and he potentially could be rated lower than Willie de Hull and Naturally Nimble, which would be almost unfathomable on the actual bare form that they've done this season. But that's the reality of what could happen. So yeah, he could be a good thing. And a favourite's got to win it at some point, right? But maybe that's why the BHA handicapper will relent, because they'll be like, well, who cares? Let's give him a nice mark. The shorter he goes off, the less chance he's got. I don't think that's how they do official handicaps, unless things have changed. But yeah, Stencil, I like that, Will. And of course,
with regards to weights, Dave, the one thing I keep coming back to with regards to festival handicaps is presenting Percy. Do you remember when he won the Pertemps in 2017, I think it was, when, he had a high mark for that. And everyone was like, oh, how can you give him such a high mark, etc., etc. And the connections were like, oh, he's got £5 too much. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. If your horse is tuned to the minute, suited to the track, suited to the test that particular race gives, it doesn't matter. An extra £3 or £4 makes no difference whatsoever. You can quite quickly counteract that by being hampered at the first hurdle and you get put back, however many lengths. There are different factors at play here. So even if Stencil got early 140s, they should still just go and win it.
Nice. I love the bullishness. And with him being about a 6-1 poke, and there are probably 5 places up for grabs, even at this stage, not running money back, where I've potentially, myself and Will, throughout the 4 days, we'll talk about some horses that might be sort of each way type plays. This might be one to start sticking at each way ACCA as well, because even just the place part of these ones will start rolling up at, say, 5-4, 6-4. And once the win part's dead, you're just rolling up those place parts anyway. So I like it, Will. You've even made me feel like I need to get Stencil in the book early doors. So we'll have to get that done. Right, moving on to the National Hunt Novices Handicap Chase. That's a mouthful now. It used to just be the National Hunt Chase, didn't it? Obviously, the conditions of this race have changed this season, Will, which I don't think anyone would have known about, would they, until it was publicly made clear. So I don't think trainers would have been thinking about this back at the end of last season or earlier in the summer. I don't know, but that's me trying to think in the nicest way that everyone's treated the same and everyone gets the information at the same times. But what I do mean is, this year's renewal is going to be a very different beast to what it will be in a couple of years' time, when people get hurdlers and they get these national type horses where they know now they've got a big target race at the Cheltenham Festival. I actually welcome the changes for this race, because the National Hunt Chase before was a small field quite often. It did you to just go to the best rated horses, and a lot of those horses should have been running in a Brown advisory anyway. So the way that this race has been shaped now, in the future, this is going to produce some seriously good horses, and there'll be a lot I think there'll be a lot more plotty types in the future than there will be this season. So with that all said, I don't think there's too many conspiracy theories in this race. I think there's a few horses that have fitted the profile. The trainers have felt lucky when the conditions have changed. And I think, as far as I'm concerned, that Haiti Couleurs is a horse that deserves to be like well up towards the top of the betting. But Transmission's just a horse that, you know, when you watch a horse run win and you just think that wins that race. He's just a nice little boaty type of horse. But it goes back to when he ran against Highland as well. He had no right to be able to travel with Highland as far as he did, and then just got outsped. We've seen that horse come second in a Feltham again when it turned into a sprint. So he's essentially 10 lengths off of like a Kauto Star Novices Chase on that debut, entitled to need the run. Then the run after, when they got Patrick on board, I started to think, oh, he's probably like a Kim Muir type horse than if they get an amateur over to ride him. But I think we remember last year at Plumpton when Joe Anderson almost got unshipped and then gave one of the rides of the season to win on this horse. Yeah. I think he might just be a bit of a handful. And I reckon that's maybe why he got Patrick on, because it was an amateur race and he thought, I need to get the best, strongest, basically most professional jockey I can to make sure that this horse wins, because he was well fancied that day, duly obliged. Then when he's run after behind Haiti Couleurs, I can't stop watching the replay and in any way, shape or form picture that Transmission doesn't beat Haiti Couleurs when they go another half a mile up in trip, and the handicap has switched around the weights a little bit, so he's getting £3 on that horse, or he's £3 better off now. So I just look at it and think Transmission looks absolutely bomb-proof, especially from the British Challenge side of things. Neil Mulholland's name-checked this race. As much as I was worried about the Kim Muir, I think they are going to come here. And the fact that he's raced him exclusively at Cheltenham as well, I think he's just looked at the conditions of this and thought, I can't believe we're going to get a Cheltenham Festival winner with Transmission, when in a typical year, he might still come to this race with a little bit of a chance. He might be the one at 40s, 50s that people say, oh, he's got a bit of a chance. He might not quite have the class, but we know he stays, he'll run into a place. I think he's got every chance of winning this one. And of the Irish battalion, like, Now Is the Hour, Captain Cody were both a bit eye-catching last time, but I don't buy into Now Is the Hour. That was in a novice chase back end of March or May, wasn't it? Where he got like over 2 miles, but it got beat. And I know it's the wrong potential trip for it, but I don't think they thought about this as far in advance as some people may be suggesting. And then Shannon Royale's another one of the Irish horses that I think you could make a bit of a case for. But I think you could put a blanket over the Irish horses and say these are the few that have got a chance. Whereas I think when it comes to the British battalion, Transmission in my mind is the one that will be the best of the Brits. 9-1 about him now. I think there's 5 places up for grabs each way on this one as well. He's a dour stayer. We know he obviously can be a bit of a track specialist, because he showed that at Plumpton last year twice, winning at that track. But he's run exclusively at Cheltenham. He's won here. He likes it here. He will relish the extra step up in trip. So he'd be one of my stronger fancies across the week. Him in an each way double with a changer man on day one should get us off to an absolute flyer, Will. Are you of the same thought? Because I think there's a few people that I spoke to about this race that, well, I don't want to say they fully disagree with me, but don't see things the same as me. They don't think that he can reverse the form of Haiti Couleurs for a start, so they don't think he can win a National Hunt Chase. How do you see it?
Yeah, I think I would be more edging towards that side of things. I must admit, I don't want to dampen your fire. I think that's a key piece of form, that Novices Handicap Chase at the December meeting, because you got Moonda Orn. She was back in 15 lengths back in 4th on that occasion, has come out and won a good 2.5 mile handicap chase at the at Trials Day. I think that the key thing with me with Haiti Couleurs and Transmission, if you watch the final furlong of the race, Transmission is inching closer to Haiti Couleurs. So you could think, okay, well, that over an extra 6 furlongs or 5 furlongs or whatever it is, that gap will close. I don't know if that's absolutely the best way to look at it. I might be proved wrong in that, but Haiti Couleurs' run style, his ability to travel on the front end prominently around Cheltenham, to gallop, to jump, Transmission will be ridden a bit differently, just edges out a little bit right at his fences. Much will depend on how the race is run. If it's run at an absolute breakneck tempo on the front end, which invariably, around by this stage of the festival, last race on day one, it won't be amateur jockeys anymore. I don't think it will be. And I just think Heitikeler's style of racing, I think it just appears to me like it could be a case where a few horses get to him running down the hill, and that'll be the point where they've made their effort to get to him. And then at the bottom of the hill, Sean Bowen asks Heitikeler to go up that hill again, and he just keeps on galloping. That would be the way I think about it. But, you know, happy to be proved wrong if you're very bullish on Transmission, definitely. But I think Heitikeler is probably the solid one for me at this stage because of that run style. I think he'll stay every yard of it. He won't quicken, but he'll just keep galloping. If there's one at a slightly bigger price, and I'm actually surprised that he's not as big a price as I thought he might be, but Huey Morrison's Ide is one just to keep half an eye on. He's a horse who's flown under the radar a little bit because when he was trained by Paul Webber, he was well backed on a number of occasions off marks in the high 90s, low hundreds, which is a million miles away from a Cheltenham Festival handicap. But since Huey Morrison has got hold of him, he's progressed really nicely in staying handicap chases, but around about the 0 to 110, 0 to 105 range. But every time he's been strong at the finish, and he did well, I think, to pick up ADL de Board at Kempton last time out in a race that developed into a sprint. If you look at Ide's pedigree, the dam side, she's related to Rule the World, Grand National winner. So I think he could be a horse that takes a massive step up for this particular test. I think he's 20 to 1 best price. I would have expected slightly bigger, actually. I don't know if he's been backed at various stages. Maybe he was back when he won at Kempton. I don't know. But he's definitely one that if he can get 20 to 1 plus at some stage, he could be the type of horse that improves for that particular test.
Oh, I like it. And this is a race where I can't wait for final declarations because it could be a race that's really, really deep because there's lots of horses that have got multiple entries across the stake of the week that we probably don't think are going to come here. But who knows? It might just turn out that they all just come here in the end and it ends up real deep race. Even horses like that Hastings as well is in a monster price now. I know he can't really jump, but looks like he stays all day. Same with Jessica and Kim Muir, but there's just the other late entries that some horses have had thrown into this particular race. It could end up being quite a deep one. I know there's the 145 ceiling on there because they talked about Stella Story maybe being the type for this, but he wouldn't have got in. But yeah. I mean, it does look a real good race, to be fair. I'm excited about Transmission just because I feel like he's the type that will fill the frame, whether he gets the job done or not. Like, obviously, I hope that he does. I just struggle to find that there's going to be too many better than him, but it does look like it's going to be a competitive race. It's one I'm excited about. Win, lose, or draw in there. I'm definitely looking forward to the National One Chase, and I think that proves that the changes they've made to it is a bit better because typically on preview nights people would say, well, do we even need to bother covering this one? It'll just be Patrick, whatever he picks or whatever Jamie Codd picks. And we haven't got that luxury this year. Right, Will, that wraps up day one. Should we just say what at this point what our best bet for day one would be if we had to give the viewers something?
Yeah, Stencil in the Fred Winter.
Absolutely. Right, I'll go change your man in the Ultima then. So there's a nice little each way double for people to kick off day one that will pay for the rest of the week. You won't need another winner from us. But if you do want another winner from us, we'll be cracking on with day two. There'll be a link in the end of the video, or you can just find it through the Whichbookie channel. Again, massive thanks for your support, especially if you stayed this long through the video. Make sure you're dropping a like on the video. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel, and we will see you again very soon.